December 1941. Joseph Stalin sat in his Kremlin office, staring at intelligence reports that should have terrified him. German tanks were rolling toward Moscow. His armies were bleeding out in the frozen mud. The Nazi war machine seemed unstoppable. Then a telegram arrived that changed everything. Hitler had just committed the most catastrophic blunder in military history, declaring war on the United States. And Stalin, he couldn't believe his luck. Let's rewind for a second. Stalin wasn't some confident wartime leader in late 1941. The man was drowning. Operation Barbarossa had torn through Soviet defences like a chainsaw through butter. 3 million German soldiers had crashed across his borders in June. By December, the Wehrmacht stood just miles from the Kremlin walls. Soviet casualties, already over 4 million dead, wounded or captured. The Red Army was fighting with its back against the wall, throwing undertrained conscripts into meat grinder battles just to slow the German advance. Stalin had begged Britain for help. He'd pleaded for a second front to relieve the pressure. Winston Churchill sent supplies, but no invasion force. The Soviet dictator was running out of options, running out of men, running out of time. His only hope was that somehow, some way, the war would expand beyond Europe. He needed the balance of power to shift before Moscow fell. December 7th, 1941. Japanese aircraft carrier planes screamed down on Pearl Harbor. The attack devastated the American Pacific Fleet. But here's what most people miss about that day. Stalin didn't care about American battleships burning in Hawaii. He cared about one thing only. Would this bring America into the war against Germany? For 4 agonizing days, Stalin waited. President Franklin Roosevelt declared war on Japan. Sure, but Germany? That was the question keeping Soviet intelligence officers up all night. Hitler had no treaty obligation to join Japan's fight. He could have stayed neutral, kept hammering the Soviets, forced America to focus on the Pacific. It would have been the smart play. December 11th changed everything. Adolf Hitler walked into the Reichstag and declared war on the United States. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. The Führer stood before German lawmakers and basically handed Stalin the greatest gift in Soviet history. He turned a 2-front nightmare into a 3-superpower alliance against the Axis. Soviet records from that period tell us something fascinating. Stalin didn't celebrate with champagne and speeches. That wasn't his style. Instead, he immediately called his top military commanders and started doing math. Cold, brutal, strategic math. American industrial capacity dwarfed anything the Soviet Union could produce. American factories were churning out tanks, planes, and trucks at rates that seemed physically impossible. And now all that production power would flow toward defeating Germany. The Soviet leader understood the game board better than almost anyone. He'd been playing geopolitical chess while most world leaders were still learning checkers. Germany couldn't fight the Soviet Union, Britain and America simultaneously. The Wehrmacht was good, maybe the best trained military force on earth in 1941. But nobody's that good. Hitler had just signed his own death warrant, and Stalin knew it. Here's where it gets interesting. Within weeks of Hitler's declaration, American aid started flowing to the Soviet Union through the Lend-Lease program. Thousands of trucks, millions of tons of food, aviation fuel, communications equipment, railroad supplies. The stuff that doesn't make Hollywood movies but wins actual wars. Soviet forces were suddenly mobile again, fed again, connected again. Stalin played this perfectly too. He never publicly thanked America for the help. He downplayed the assistance in Soviet propaganda, made it seem like Russian courage alone was defeating the Germans. But privately, his generals knew the truth. American spam fed Soviet soldiers. American trucks moved Soviet artillery. American industrial might gave the Red Army the logistical backbone to push back. Why did Hitler do it? You know, historians still argue about this. Some say he believed America would enter the war anyway, so why wait? Others point to his increasingly delusional worldview, his contempt for American fighting ability, his bizarre theories about racially inferior societies. Whatever his reasoning, the decision was catastrophically stupid. Germany gained nothing from declaring war on America. Absolutely nothing. They already had Japan fighting the Americans in the Pacific. Hitler could have forced Roosevelt to split American resources between two theaters without making Germany a direct target. Instead, he gave Stalin exactly what the Soviet dictator desperately needed: a clear path to victory. American factories working overtime to crush the Third Reich. The combined industrial and military might of three global superpowers focused on destroying Nazi Germany. From that moment forward, Hitler was fighting a war he mathematically could not win. Stalin never forgot that moment. For the rest of the war, and for years after, he understood that Hitler's reckless declaration had saved the Soviet Union. It transformed World War II from a possible German victory into an inevitable Allied triumph. The Eastern Front would still cost millions of Soviet lives. Stalingrad, Kursk, the brutal march to Berlin, all of that horror still lay ahead. But the outcome? No longer in doubt. The old dictator in the Kremlin must have allowed himself a rare smile that December night in 1941. His greatest enemy had just destroyed himself, and Stalin didn't even have to lift a finger. Want more untold stories from the greatest conflict in human history? Subscribe to the Last Pacific War Chronicles. Hit that notification bell. Share this video with anyone who thinks they know everything about World War II. Because, trust us, there's always another layer to uncover. We'll see you in the next one.